Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter. Uh-oh. My mic just got fucked up. Look at that. We got issues. We got issues. Some crazy issues.
We haven't done a live show in like 3 weeks, 4 weeks or something, Dan, and it just went, oh my gosh. All right. So the whole thing just collapsed.
This has been a day from absolute hell for me.
There we go. We can hear you now, though. We can hear
not
you.
on the mic. This has been a day from hell for me. And like literally everything that could go wrong today has gone wrong, Nick.
Murphy's
And it's
Law.
no surprise to me that this would happen.
You're the Giants.
I mean, look, the Giants, this is good news if I'm getting all the bad luck out now. I'll say that to start. But my God, has this been a day from hell for me? And I've been waiting. And I was looking forward to this all day because I knew we were doing this, Nick. And I'm like, this is the one good thing that's going to happen today. And nothing bad's going to happen from it. It's going to be great. Time's going to be great.
And great facial hair, though. So we're getting compliments.
We got compliments to make myself feel better. But just everything that could go wrong went wrong today, boys. But we're here. We're back. We're live. We haven't done live in a while. I was excited all day for this. I wanted to talk Giants draft with all you guys, all you special people out there. The good news is, look, it takes some time to let people get in here anyway. Nick tweeted it out. So it's going to go down in history as one of the funniest things that just happened on the show with Mike falling apart. And
if I may, Dan, I may, you recovered pretty well.
I did a decent recovery. It only took like a minute and 12 seconds, but
it could have been a lot worse.
God,
you have a salmon colored shirt on. You know, you're just reflecting what the New York Giants have been over the last decade.
Yes, buttoned up here. All right, well, we're off. Now the show is live. I tweeted it out, Nick. I'm sure you have as well. So hopefully we'll wait for some more people to join us here in the show. Take a look at some of the comments and things like that. But tonight we're here to kind of, debrief, talk. We've done so much content at this point, Nick. We've had almost a podcast a day for the last month. More if you go back. We've covered tons of different players, different profiles, 7-round dueling mock draft, our My Guys show. You can all find all that content on the page. And tonight, we're just here to talk about what you guys want to talk about, essentially. We'll have some broad topics we want to discuss, but in the end, it's going to come down to your questions. So put your questions in the super chat function. Please get those in and get your questions in the chat. And we'll take those as well. We'll try to get to as many as we can, obviously. But, Nick, how are you feeling as we're now, 48 hours until the start of the draft?
How am I feeling? I am eager. I just want it to happen at this point, Dan. And it's always like that every single year. I'm always just very interested to see exactly what they're going to do. Yet again, the Giants are picking in the top 10, which is the Giants are not a stranger to. But last year, we were hoping that Deonte Banks would fall. And we thought it was a pipe dream. At least I know I did. I did not think Deonte Banks would fall as far as he did, and he did. And I'm glad the New York Giants were able to select him. But right now, the Giants are in a position where, look, they can go with a franchise face, a quarterback. That's within striking distance. If Drake May or JJ McCarthy falls to them at 6. Diana Rossini of The Athletic recently reported that it's a tough sell, I think is what she said, for Joe Schoen in the front office to trade up to 3 or 4 after giving Daniel Jones the contract that they just gave him less than a year and a half ago. And I got to say, man, if that's the case, like we've said it so many times in the offseason, you're in striking distance. You're not planning to be in striking distance again. If you love a guy, you cannot allow the Daniel Jones contract to prevent you from going out and getting that guy if he is within striking range. So that's kind of where I'm at. And then if they don't, and they do sit at 6, the trade back, I'm willing to entertain. And if they just sit there and select one of the wide receivers, I'll be happy with that too.
Yeah, it's interesting that I called BS on that report. Not to say Diana Rossini doesn't have good sources. I think she's a great reporter. I think at this stage of the draft cycle, a lot of this stuff is smoke, and a lot of what, like, she could easily be hearing this from a source, and that source was purposely leaked by the Giants to give that information to Diana to sell something. And the reason I call BS is, look, I've already seen John Mara move on from the Odell Beckham Jr. contract within months of signing that contract. And it was 2019. There's less guaranteed money involved. It wasn't a quarterback, but he moved on fast and he ate dead cap there. And they signed this deal with Jones, a 2-year deal with a 2-year out, essentially, if things didn't go well. And let's be honest, things have not gone well. Jones was horrible last year. I know he had a bad situation, really bad situation, but independently, he was not good. And I think anyone who watches the tape can see that. Anyone who watched our breakdowns could see that. Anyone, in my mind, with 2 eyes could see, even from the broadcast, that he was not good independent, and he had a bad situation. But in addition to that, He had a season-ending ACL injury, and this is a quarterback who's relied on his legs for most of his EPA in his career. His best games have just been him scrambling. And there's question marks around that, not just regarding the injury, but regarding, what defenses have done to change that, right? We saw this with Daniel Jones. We saw this with Jalen Hurts. They stopped allowing the B gap. They rushed the passer in a certain way that forces the quarterback, if he wants to step up and run, to move to the outside. And when Jones rolled to his right last year, instead of taking the B gap because the B gap wasn't there, it was bad. It was 6 yards, 4 yards at max, and it was a lot of roll out, throw out of bounds. So they're a big question mark. So I don't really buy the report. I think the Giants will be willing to move on. For me, Nick, what it comes down to as far as the quarterbacks is, what are the Patriots going to do? That's what it comes down to. I think we're locked in at this point of having Caleb Williams 1, Jaden Daniels 2. I think we can almost write that thing down right now. And then it gets to 3, and things get very interesting because there's 2 camps for both the Patriots and the Giants. 1, do the Patriots love Drake May? 2, do the Patriots love J.J. McCarthy? 1, do the Giants love Drake May? 2, do the Giants love J.J. McCarthy? Those questions are going to decide the draft for the Giants and for the Patriots. The Patriots obviously in the driver's seat here because they're able to decide what they want to do. And we'll find out fast if the Giants really want a quarterback. Now, my question for you, Nick, is this. Do you feel – so I think the Giants are in the market for trying to trade up for a quarterback. But based on what Joe Schoen did with Brandon Beane in Buffalo, which was kind of a all-out, let's just get our guy kind of thing, I think they're going to be aggressive, and maybe from a game theory standpoint, it's not going to come back to haunt them if the guy works out at quarterback, but it's going to be interesting because, let's say the Patriots don't want the guy the Giants want at quarterback. So say the Giants really want Drake May, and the Patriots want JJ. If the Giants do what I think they'll do, which is trade up to 3, they don't really need to if that Patriots don't want that quarterback, because the Patriots go the other quarterback at 3. I think the Cardinals are just going to sit at 4 and take Harrison. And then you're trading what, a 3rd round pick to move to 6 to 5 instead of what could be next year's first. I know the Jets only gave up 3 seconds to move up from 6 to 3 in the Darnold draft, but I've heard that the Giants, if they want to go from 6 to 3, they're going to have to give up their 1st round pick next year. So it's really interesting from a game theory standpoint what the Giants will do there, because if the Patriots are willing to trade back from 3 to 6, it obviously means they don't want the quarterback that you want, right?
Yes, but you also have to, and I know you know this, take into account, are the Cardinals or the Chargers for that matter, or the Patriots willing to trade down with the Vikings, who are at 11 and 23, the Raiders, who are at 13, and who's the other team? Denver, who's at 12. If Denver wants to pass up with some of their future assets, I don't think they have a 2nd round pick this year. But yeah, no, it's interesting. It does become game theory. I think the Giants understand that their roster, it needs depth. Their roster is not rounded out right now. And that's one of the reasons why I also think trading down is something that could be in play. But you're sitting there staring at Neighbors, Odunze. Do you want to pass up on those 2 guys since the Giants have desperately needed a pass catcher? I mean, one of the biggest talking points, Dan, about the New York Giants over the last 10 years has been, we need to find Daniel Jones a number 1 pass catcher. And they've tried through various avenues and have failed. Kadarius Toney, Kenny Golladay, Darren Waller, and he has a lot going on right now, right? We're not even sure if he's going to be back. You can get one who could be an alpha wide receiver at 6 if you just stay put and select him with Odunze and Neighbors. And that could realistically just be what happens. That's what we've been saying. And a lot of people have been saying for quite a while, just been linking wide receiver there. But man, it's just, to go back to it, Dan, they're in striking distance. If you have that conviction, Joe Schoen, Brian Daboll, you have to go and get that guy. You have to, because I don't think you're going to be in striking distance again. And if you are, you're not going to be the one making that selection.
Yeah, they won't be making that selection. In addition to that, if you interfere in striking distance, there may not be quarterbacks worth striking for. There was a class a couple years ago where Kenny Pickett was the QB1. That's not a quarterback you trade up for. That's not a quarterback you do anything for. There's no arm talent there whatsoever with Kenny Pickett, and no frame and no athleticism. That's not it's just rare to find quarterbacks that are actually worth trading up for, in my opinion. I have my conviction on the one in this class, but that's not going to come every class. So I'm curious what they're going to do, Nick, but I do wonder, if the plan is not to trade it for a quarterback, get Daniel Jones a wide receiver, is that decision to get a receiver for Jones, or is it just to get a receiver for the franchise? That's the question that I wonder.
It's to get a receiver for the franchise. Now, both of those things can be synonymous, right? You can get a receiver for Jones, but it's not just Daniel Jones is for certain our long-term guy. They built an out in his contract for a reason. And they are look, dude, we know that John Mara has an affinity for Daniel Jones. They want to give this guy the the requisite shot that they believe he deserves. And I think John Mara feels bad about not surrounding the young man with a lot of talent early in his career. I think it's safe to say that. But at some point, you do got to turn the page. And this is a quarterback coming off of another injury-riddled season where he tore his ACL, and he was injured before that. They have to face the facts, and they have to turn that page. Now, if it's not by spending that pick on a quarterback, bringing in a wide receiver is not just, oh, well, Daniel Jones needs a wide receiver. That's just short-sighted, right? It's for the longevity, as you know, the 30,000-foot view, as you like to say, portion of what they're actually trying to do, which is build a roster that can compete for a Super Bowl. And I tell you this, Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze are going to help you do that, regardless of who the quarterback is, if you're not going to select that quarterback, or if the quarterback that you love has already been selected in the draft.
I would agree with that. I would also ask you this, Nick. What's your feel for the situation? And by the situation, I mean this. This is just something we haven't really discussed on the pod. I have the feeling, I hope people don't take this as the wrong way because they're the way they feel about things, but I have the feeling based on all the Giants' actions this offseason, not restructuring Jones's contract, not touching it, not saying a lot outside of the public obvious stuff like we believe in Jones when he's under contract. I think I think the Rich Eisen report is correct, that they're done with Daniel Jones at this cap hit of $45 million. They may view Jones as someone who they could re-sign at a cheaper price, cut him, re-sign him, or, he takes a massive pay cut. But I find it so hard to believe that they would trade for Brian Burns, extend him on one of the biggest contracts ever for a DM when you already did that with Andrew Thomas and Dexter Lawrence. You're starting to add up all these massive cap hits and then move forward and say, we'll also allocate 20% of our cap space to Daniel Jones. I just don't personally believe that's what I don't get that feel at all right now.
And that's also with the injury guarantee that we hear a lot about too, right? Like you factor that in
at all, by the way.
No, they haven't. And we know this roster needs a lot of help, like we've said, but they do have foundational building blocks. Like this could be a quick turnaround. And I'm imagining that's what Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll want, a la what the Houston Texans just did. Right. You got to strike while the iron is hot on a rookie quarterback contract. And you did go out and give Brian Burns that contract. You have Dexter Lawrence under contract, Andrew Thomas, a star left tackle. So there is at least
4 players under contract that are pretty freaking damn good. If you want to include Kip Thibodeau, if you don't, that's fine. But they have 3 potential all pro type players that are 25 or younger, 26, whatever. I think Burns is 25 or 26.
I think he's 25 and Dex is 26.
Dex is 26.
Or no, I think Dex is actually 25. Dex.
Yeah, I think they got 3 potential all pro types. If you want to include Burns in that, maybe not.
He's 26, but sorry.
Okay. I think Burns could really potentially break out to that level with Shane Bowen. I think they traded for him for a reason. They think he fits exactly what they want to do schematically, and he's going to break out here versus how he was used in Carolina. And if you have 3 potential guys like that, including a franchise left tackle to protect the next quarterback, I don't think we're that far away. We just watched Mahomes win a Super Bowl without really that. He had Kelsey, who was injured basically the whole year. Nothing really going on from a receiving standpoint there. It was offensive line, it was defensive line, and defense for the Chiefs, 2 good corners. And that's how they want to and a great quarterback. And that's how they won a Super Bowl. And it's not the first time we've seen teams win Super Bowls without star receivers.
Exactly. But they have a generational player in Patrick Mahomes. As I know,
you get Mahomes. Yeah.
Yeah. As I know, you understand. And they have a really strong offensive line. I mean, it wasn't long ago, Dan, when we were watching the Tampa Bay Buccaneers just absolutely harass Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. And we were like, dude, they need an offensive line. And what did they do? What did Brett Veach do? He went out and he spent a lot of money on the offensive line. And now the Chiefs have just been consistently competing for Super Bowls ever since. Now they have Patrick Mahomes, but it's also because of the trenches, as you brought up. So you look at the Giants, do they have enough on their trenches? That's another question. We don't even really we haven't really talked a lot about Joe Alt being an option. I don't think he's going to be the selection, but Dan Schneier, what would you say if the Giants actually selected an offensive line at 6? How shocked would you be? What percentage chance would you say that you would assign to that outcome?
It's funny. That's a great question, Nick. We haven't addressed this at all this draft season, right?
Not really.
I think we haven't really talked about this possibility whatsoever. And I've said in the past, I think I said to you last night on the show or one of the recent shows where if they do make the trade down with the Vikings in that 11-23 range, that's where I actually am interested in offensive linemen. So with that said, I shouldn't be that uninterested at 6. And I'm not, to be honest with you. If they took Joe Alt at 6 and shocked the world, because I think no one expects this coming, I wouldn't be totally mad at it because in the end, I still am a guy who believes the trenches should be built before the receivers, and that a lot of receivers can look good if you have good O-line and good quarterback. You can make a lot of receivers look good. And I still believe in that. I'm never going to get away from that. I also kind of believe that some receivers are wasted when you don't have good trench play and good quarterback play.
I could see both sides of this argument.
Mhm.
It's like, dude, we as Giant fans have bitched and complained for so long about the offensive line. So it's like, can you hate on the New York Giants for actually selecting a possible Pro Bowl type of offensive lineman at 6? But I also see the flip side, which I kind of fall into this camp as well. It's, you have Evan Neal under contract. He has been injured. He is a very talented young man who just has not been actualized. You have a new offensive line coach, and you also brought in contingency plans and set them in place if Evan Neal fails. Like, we talk a lot about Illuminor and Runyon, rightfully so, but I think Aaron Stinney is one of the better interior offensive line swing guards that the Giants have had for quite a while. He had solid tape with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Like, if he's forced to start, he's going to play better than a lot of the swing guards that the Giants have had in recent memory. And Schlottman, he had experience playing in the outside zone system with Kevin O'Connell, but that's a backup to John Michael Schmitz. And hopefully John Michael Schmitz can take something from his presence being on the roster if he does make the final 53. I can see both sides of the argument. Ultimately, I do think the Giants probably should go offensive line later in the draft if they decide to go offensive line, judging by their moves that they've made in free agency with all the signings I just discussed. But if they did go Joe Alt, can we sit here and be like, oh man, I'm so pissed about this? It's like, no, man, like, we need to figure out this problem, because this has been a problem for the New York Giants for a decade plus now at this point.
Yeah, and that I'm with you on that. It is interesting though, Nick, because I just saw the stat today, and I think I posted on Twitter. Over the last 5 years, no teams used more capital on offensive line than the Giants. So it's like, it does feel like a little bit of the old saying, which is, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. But at the same time, like, I just can't get myself too worked up about investing in the trenches, because I don't really believe that receivers are as important as other people do. I like them, I want them, but I also kind of like, sometimes there's a type of receiver I want, Nick, and there's a type of receiver I don't want. The diva types I don't really want on the roster anymore in general. And I'm not saying any of these guys are, just in general. Like, I know I'm not getting that of an offensive lineman. I'm just getting a lunch pail dude who's going to not do, like, he's not going to come to work and do his job if he's great. But at the same time, on that note, Nick, which is interesting to me, I was asked this question last night on a show, an interview show I did with Adriana, who's Giants fan girl. You should check out her work. And she asked me an interesting question. And this goes into like part of why I wouldn't prefer Alt at 6, Joe Alt, the offensive lineman, because I still think the ceiling for this team is Evan Neal figures it out, and you get it, and you don't double down on that asset. Yeah. You don't use 2 assets to get one position. You can use the other asset for receiver. But what she questioned me on was, which is a good question, are the Giants better off going into camp with Evan Neal transitioning to guard and Illuminor at right tackle? And I'll ask you that question. What do you think about that?
I think you give Evan Neal the shot to win that job. That's why you drafted him. I think you feel it out at camp. Look, camp's long. Camp's a long process. And you have this different offensive line coach. I think Evan Neal's ceiling is him working out at tackle. We haven't seen it yet. I think Illuminor has the experience at right tackle, playing for Carmen Bracillo in this possible similar type of system that they employed with the Raiders. So I think it could be a quick transition if you realize that Evan Neal is not the guy, and you could be Jermaine Illuminor, get out there, right tackle, Evan Neal, we could try to kick you in guard. It might not be an ideal situation. And there is a part of me that's like, Nick, you're an idiot, but I don't want to give up on Evan Neal at right tackle quite yet. I don't. I do like the process, and I think that should be entertained, and I'm sure the coaching staff is talking about it, but I'm not quite there yet. Allow him to at least win this job. And if by week 5 or 6, it's not working out, kick him inside and we could see what we could do from there.
I think her point was that at that point, you won't be able to really just kick him inside.
I know.
And I know you know that. It's just like an interesting point by her. But my response was along the same lines as you, which is like, I think a big part of the issue for Evan Neal so far in his Giants career, just thinking about what we saw at Alabama versus now, and it's so night and day, has been purely confidence. Like I discussed this with her, like I brought up the golf reference when I go up to putt, but like, if you move him to right guard, Nick, that's it. The confidence is shot at that point, right? Like you're telling him, we don't believe you can be a tackle at the NFL level. And I don't think it's going to be good for him. Like, yes, it's going to help with the issues he has defending pass rushers up the arc who beat him with quickness and speed, but like, because he'll have 2 guys on his left and his right, but it's going to kill his confidence. And I just don't want to do that yet. And maybe this is a mistake by us that we're still hanging on to this asset 2-3 years in, but I just can't get that Bama tape out of my head.
I think it could be a mistake by us, but I'm willing to at least roll the dice on this, because I still think there's an upside with him at right tackle. But I would love to see him at guard if this does fail, because I think, like, from a run blocking standpoint, if you put him next to Andrew Thomas, like, those two would be so much fun on duo blocks
Yeah.
and double team blocks, and also employing him on trap. That would be a lot of fun as well. But hopefully we don't get to that point. Hopefully it's more of an injury riddled thing. It was a confidence thing, and that stuff gets rekindled with a different offensive line coach, different offensive line room, a little bit of a different atmosphere. That's the hope, but maybe I'm just nuts.
No, I don't think you're nuts, Nick. I think it's still possible, especially with the new O-line coach. We have to figure out something went wrong, and we have to figure out exactly what that is as far as his development so far. And it's not just him. It's like we said, most draft capital used by any team on the offensive line in the last 5 years has been the Giants. So it's clearly there's issues across the board from a development standpoint, not just with Evan Neal. Do we have questions we can start running down?
Yeah, we have some questions here. Let's start with Jason Benjamin. Jason Benjamin, thank you so much for the donation. He says, love the podcast, fellas. I would like to stay at 6 or move down. There is no Herbert or Luck to me in this draft, in my opinion. Draft Neighbors or trade back. G-men. What's your take on that, Dan?
Yeah, everybody has their own opinions of this class, and that's the fun of it, right? Like, nobody's going to be 100% right ever at the quarterback position, especially. I am willing to believe that there's a potential Herbert or Luck in this class, and Drake May. I have a conviction on him. I feel like Caleb Williams is definitely in that regard as well, though obviously they have no chance at him. So for me, I'm willing to do the move up and trade for a player like that. But if you're not and you don't believe, I'm with you. Like, if you don't, I think you're doing this right, Jason. Instead of just taking the quarterback to take the quarterback because your current quarterback situation is so bad, you're better off not going for a guy that you don't have a conviction on, because otherwise you're leading down a bad path, a path that could lead to another second contract for a guy that's not that good, or a 15th-ish range quarterback that you're paying 40, 50 million cap space to. So I'm okay with that. As far as the trade down versus Neighbors part, Nick, it's a weird class to me, Nick. I don't really love the trade down idea because I don't love what's after the big 3 receivers. Like, if they needed a tackle desperately, I'd be more okay with this, because you can get one of those great guys. But like, the fact that they kind of need, like, you could some sort of convince me on these corners, but I just feel like you're losing a lot going from one of those big 3 receivers to one of those corners.
I don't think that's a bad take. I think you're right. I think there is a definitive tier drop off between Odunze, Neighbors, and the AD Mitchells of the world. Although we like the Ricky Pearsalls and the Ladd McConkey, they're different types of receivers, because I do think that those top two guys, a lot of people think this, they're true alpha type of wide receivers, right? So if the trade back were to happen, it would be 11, 23. You can get some stud corners though, dude. And there are a lot of other defensive line. People don't want to hear that, but if you did add like a Byron Murphy to this team, that would be a huge difference maker. Again, the Giants, they prioritize the trenches, but they still have that, I don't want to say weak link, but they still have that question mark next to Dexter Lawrence. How comfortable do you feel? And this is no shot at Raheem Nunez-Roches, but that's your like definite number 2 defensive lineman right now. Nothing's going to happen in training camp. Maybe DJ Davidson takes a 3rd-year jump. But right now, it's Raheem Nunez-Roches on a team that's going to be rushing 4 a lot. Does that really give you like this great feeling in a pass rushing sense and in a run defending sense? Like, not necessarily. So I still think that defensive line spot could be something that the Giants did trade back, that they would maybe select with their 2nd or 3rd pick. And it could be a Braden Fisk or Byron Murphy from Texas if it were to be a trade back.
Yeah, I think that's a great point by you. And I think it hasn't been discussed that much, but interior defensive line will be a bigger priority during the draft than we think. And the Giants could take one in the round 2, round 3 range, assuming they don't move back. And I wouldn't be surprised about it, because you're right. This is going to be a team that relies on rush 4, drop 7 a lot of the time. And that means, not all the time, but a lot of the time, that means you got to trust those 4 to rush the passer. We trust 3 of them right now. And maybe you could convince me that you could kick Burns inside and have like Ojulari and Thibodeau.
Nah, man, you got to kick Thibodeau inside of anybody.
Yeah, maybe it would be Thibodeau who you kick inside, right? But even then, like, you could, you would like to have a player in the rotation, regardless, who you feel confident that can rush the passer from the interior.
And this is also just a team that's had so many defensive linemen recently. And we know Joe Shane prioritized it last year. Got A'Shawn Robinson, got Raheem Nunez-Roches. No more Leonard Williams on the roster. So you need somebody else to play next to Dex. And I don't think Joe Shane or Brian Daboll wants Dexter Lawrence playing 950 snaps again.
Right. Good point. That was crazy. I don't think that'll happen. I think that was kind of Wink specific. And I don't know if that'll happen with Bowen.
I think it was also just like he was cooking the entire 2022 season. Homeboy was cooking and he was eating. Man, he was eating. Takes a lot to sustain a 346-pound interior defensive lineman, and that was such a good season, such a fun season to watch.
It was a beast on tape. What else we got?
All righty, let's move on to 1ZN0's Thank you so much for the donation. I probably said that awkwardly. If we get Drake May, he asks, and he ends up at least as good as Herbert, would it matter what we gave up to get him?
My answer would be no. I think the benefit would be that, some people are like, what do you mean Herbert hasn't won anything? And I'm like, well, have you seen the coach for the Chargers? I would hope that Brian Dable wouldn't be as bad as the coach that Staley was. I mean, that was some of the worst coaching I've ever seen. And then I'd say, have you seen the construction of that roster, the defense? And that's also on Staley as well. Just not very good at all there. I would hope that Shane and Dable could build a better product around the next quarterback, that being Herbert. But also, Giants would have the benefit of not playing in the conference with Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Joe Burrow. All three of those guys and CJ Stroud, you can add to the mix these days now. You don't have any of them. You got Brock Purdy, you got Jalen Hurts. Like, this ain't like that ain't like, I'm not worried about those guys in that sense. And I think like if the Giants got to the level of Herbert, if they drafted May, and let's say he became Herbert or better, Nick, you could make a case the Giants will have the best quarterback in the entire conference at that point, right? Like if you put Herbert right into the NFC, I think he would be the best quarterback in the conference right now.
I don't even know who would be second.
I guess
if he was Herbert in year one, if by like week 3, we're like, yo, dude, this guy's crazy. Right. If that's like the reality that we find ourselves in,
who would compete? Would be one argument people make because he had almost MVP season 2 years ago, right?
Yes. Hurts in the division, but Jalen Hurts still has some drawbacks as a thrower.
A lot.
Football. So yeah, I think that could significantly change the trajectory of the New York Giants if they were to hit on that, and if Drake May were to become that player. Right. Jane Daniels, though, is probably going to be in the conference in our division
conference, right?
As well. So and
Caleb Williams, I forgot Caleb was going to be in the conference. I totally forgot about that.
Yeah,
so
Caleb
put him in the mix.
Yeah, man.
Especially if the Bears go to a dome with their new stadium, which I've read they might do, which would be an amazing move by them. If I draft Caleb Williams and I'm building a new stadium, I'm the owner, there's a 100% chance I'm building a dome. I don't bear weather. Oh, I want bear weather. Bear weather is the dumbest thing in the world. Bear weather means absolutely nothing to anyone unless you have like a 86 Bears type of defense and that type of team. Build your stadium around your new team. Caleb Williams, let him throw in a dome. Don't make him throw in Chicago win. It's crazy.
Honestly, I kind of hope they make him throw in Chicago.
Yeah, for our sake.
Yeah, that might like tamper down some of the potential wild card races that are to ensue if the Giants ever get there, of course.
Sure.
Gil Martinez says, "Yo, Nick, that mustache. This is a family show, so I will keep my thoughts to myself. But oh, wee baby, Gil, thank you so much. You know what? Diana's coming around on the mustache a little bit, so I'm sitting here. I'm like, yo, I'm going to rock it for a little bit long. I thought it was going to be like a week thing, a 2 week thing.
What'd she say about it that led you to believe?
No, she hated it at first. She wouldn't kiss me at all at first, but now she's just like, it's not a bad look. So I'm like, thank you, And I was, just, I look very Italian with it. A lot of people
do look more Italian with the mustache. You're right. That is a good point.
Yeah. PJ, thank you so much, Gil. And PJ, thank you so much as well. He says, you both do terrific work. If they give up assets to draft a quarterback without upgrading the roster, then they are falling into the same cycle. A new quarterback is no sure thing. Very frustrating as a fan right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's one take. Look, a lot of fans have your take, PJ. We do not necessarily agree with this. We're more along the lines of you're nothing as a franchise until you get your quarterback. And if you stymie along with decent to middling quarterbacks or even worse, you end up in a bad spot because you got to pay him on a second contract and they really give you no chance to really have any long-term ceiling, right? Like you guys can, even the biggest Daniel Jones fans would tell you that if you're looking forward at a Giants future, if you were guaranteed right now to say Daniel Jones is the lock Giants quarterback for the next 5 years, taking up 20% of their salary cap, do you even the biggest fans really envision a chance for the Giants to build a winning Super Bowl roster? Or not just one run, like a consistent division winner when you're already giving 20% of the cap to a player who's at the level of Jones. So I think you'd even say no, the biggest fan. So the opposite side of that is if you can find the quarterback, you don't have to worry as much about what you're allocating cap because you don't need as much around him because he's doing more of the heavy lifting himself, like Mahomes, for example.
See, I'm so glad you brought that up because I was just about to throw this at you, Dan. Say that Drake May or whatever rookie quarterback were to come into the New York Giants right away. Did the moves that Joe Schoen and Brian Dable made during the offseason, we can admit that this roster still has a dearth of talent on it, but the moves that they did make with an upgrade at quarterback, where would the Giants be? And how much of a better position would the Giants be in than they were last year with Daniel Jones as quarterback and the roster that they had?
I don't think it's fair to compare it to last year, let's say, just because that's such a disaster with the injuries on the offensive line. I think maybe the question would better be, where would they be in 2020, like versus compared to 2022 season, right? With upgraded quarterback plans. And he was okay. He was good in 2022. His EPA was good. He ran for a lot of yards and he scrambled to first downs and made some good throws, some good third down throws and stuff like that. But obviously, didn't throw the ball much. It was sub 200-yard games, dead last in explosive pass rate. So if you did get a quarterback upgrade to 2022, now I think they could have won that division potentially in 2022. It would have been tough with the Eagles playing as well as they did, but could win a certain division or, put themselves in a better spot. So I think that I've maintained this the entire time. I don't think the Giants roster is as far away as other people do. I see three building blocks, potential all pros that I don't see on a lot of these supposed really bad rosters, or the Giants roster is so bad. Yet we have a franchise left tackle who might be the second or third best in the NFL. And he's 25. We have, in my opinion, potentially the best defensive player in football next year now that Aaron Donald's retired, and he's involved in every single play, like at the line of scrimmage. Dexter Lawrence, Kayvon Thibodeau, and Brian Burns, in addition to guys that I just think would look good with a good quarterback, like Jalen Hyatt, Wan'Dale Robinson, Darius Slayton, even Isaiah Hodgins. I all think they'd look good if the quarterback was really good. So to me, this is just not as far away. I just view it as like the Cincinnati Bengals and the Texans before they got Burrow and Stroud. I know people make the case these rosters were actually good, but it's like, no, dude, they lost every game the year before. The Bengals were the number one overall pick. I think they won a game or two. The Texans stumbled into the second pick with a win at the end of the season. They were a bad team. And then everything changed when the quarterback elevated the entire team around them.
And then you look on the defensive side too. I mean, you have a possible, he is a building block in Deonte Banks. Mm-hmm. It's just like the positions that the Giants are weak in. There's a lot of question marks because you have a lot of question marks, specifically in the secondary. Like the entire secondary is pretty much a question mark. Like, I think you can look at Banks and then Jason Pinnock, but even Jason Pinnock, we're not like, yo, man, Jason Pinnock, we got the guy. We're just like, we hope he can pick up some more weight now that Xavier McKinney is not in place anymore, right? So
right.
There are a lot of holes, but it's more so on the back end of the defense, some depth on the defensive line. We have Bobby Okereke. We never mentioned him as a building block. Maybe it's just because he's on a contract for another 2 years, but Bobby Okereke is a very competent linebacker. So to your point, I don't think the roster is as weak, maybe as even I've led on in the past. It's just certain position groups that hold them back. So if you were to bring in that quarterback that can elevate, I think the Giants could be a wild card type of team since you have that left tackle at minimum, right? Because the Cowboys, who knows what they're doing? The Eagles were really weird last year. Now the Eagles have tried
what made the Giants bad last year, Nick? Was it even really their not having a corner too? Like they had the door. Like so, to me, it was the offensive line and the quarterback play.
I think the offensive line is the number one thing.
Yeah, number one.
Made it bad because it was the injuries along the offensive line. And I just don't think they had the signal caller in place to overcome those offensive line issues. But even when the offensive line was playing relatively well in 2022, you still only received modest quarterback play. And that seems to be the ceiling for the quarterback that the New York Giants have right now. And people like you and I, we just want a higher ceiling at this point. So if the offensive line is stable next year, and Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen, they brought in guys to stabilize it. Even if Daniel Jones is a quarterback, then you hopefully, if you can adjust your offense a little bit and throw some curveballs at the defense and be a little bit more assertive and aggressive with the football as a thrower, then maybe you can return to 2022 New York Giants. It's just, is that what you want? To uber rely on efficiency and the play action passing attack that's going to more than likely be weaker now that 26 is not on your team. You don't have him. And he was the number one player every defensive coordinator was circling when the Giants would play them, whatever team it was.
Yeah, and that goes to what a great, 30,000-foot view discussion we have all the time about ceiling. And like what we look for, our ceiling is not the same as like what I even think John Mara's ceiling is, Nick. Like I think John Mara's ceiling is he'd be happy if every year we were like, if he could guarantee every year we're 9-7, 10-6, and we're going to make that wild card and the stadium's packed in week 16 and 17, like it was 2022, he'd be happy with that. Maybe win a playoff game here and there and never really go to the Super Bowl or a championship conference game like that. If he could get that every year, he'd be happy. I think what we want is consistent division winner, potential best team in the league, Super Bowl contender every year. And I think we both agree it's kind of hard to envision that with Daniel Jones. Yeah,
and it's unfortunate. I'm not trying to kick the kid while he's down, but let's look at the last 6 or 7 years. The Giants have picked second in 2018. They picked 6th in 2019. They picked 4th in 2020. They've picked high a lot, and they haven't gotten that quarterback that you see picked around there in recent memory, like the Justin Herberts, the CJ Strouds. Joe Burrow went first overall. The Giants haven't gone first overall in quite a while. My point is there have been quarterbacks that have been selected around where the Giants have picked. Now they're picking there again. And you can just trade some assets to go and get a quarterback if you have the conviction. That's, of course, what this all comes down to, if you have the conviction. So I just think they should be aggressive and do it come Thursday, man, and try to turn the page on this franchise.
Yeah, and I think somebody did a great job today. And I wish I could find this so I could put it up and present the screen, but it would take too long now. But someone did a great job today of showing me recent second-round draft picks. It's just a wasteland of busts, just a wasteland of busts over the last 3-4 years in the second round of the draft. So, like, in theory, on paper, it's like, oh, I don't want to give up all these assets to move up for the quarterback. We need this and this and this. But it's all good on paper when you're like, I'll use this pick at a corner. I'll use this pick on an edge. I'll use this pick on a guard. It's a second round pick. It's valuable, or even a first round pick. But then you look back at the history of the draft and there's an insane amount of busts in the second round. And a lot of busts also in the first round. So these assets on paper, they feel so valuable, but they're not really worth as much as finding that quarterback.
There's nothing more important in sports than finding a quarterback for your franchise.
Yep. If you could guarantee that every second round pick and future first round pick is going to be a great positional player, sure, you should never do the trade up, in my opinion, really, to be quite honest. If it's a guarantee, that's just not how the draft works. The draft is a crapshoot. There's, again, look at this. I'll find this history and I'll retweet it. I think I might have retweeted it earlier, but like the second round draft picks recently, there's been a shit ton of busts. And that's second round, man. You want to dig to round 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you're looking even worse across the board.
Peter Pasquarelli asks, trade back, or says, and accumulate assets until Arch Manning enters the draft. Yes or yes? Thanks for the hard work, fellas. Thank you so much, Peter. And Arch Manning, I heard he absolutely torched at spring ball. How good was it?
He looked good, man. I'm soaking. Well, and first of all, Peter, thank you so much for the donation. And also, in addition to that, we're going to answer this question in a second. But it's a sidebar, Nick. I was talking about this with a Texas fan that I'm friends with today or yesterday. I just don't understand what happened there, right? So two things either happened there. One, is Arch Manning really going into this season expecting to be bent a quarterback to and not play behind Quinn Ewers, and he didn't transfer? Why would he do that? Why did he stay in Texas then if he's going to sit 2 years? The other side of that is Texas really going to go to Quinn Ewers over Arch Manning? I get it. Quinn Ewers, they won a lot of games with Ewers last year. They also had Byron Murphy and great players around him. AD Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, the other D tackle who just got busted for the drugs or whatever, the DUI. But Quinn Ewers looked, for the most part, awful on the film I watched of AD Mitchell. He has some sick throws and arm talent is true, but he misses easy ass throws and just terrible. People think Drake May misses. This guy misses way worse and in way worse fashion. It's what's going to happen there? Why did Ewers come back? I find this whole thing so weird. Arch Manning, is he's really going to sit for the second year of his college? What do you think about that?
I haven't really put a lot of thought into it.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine that someone as revered as Arch Manning, who has been a higher, more discussed quarterback coming out of high school than Arch Manning?
No one. Trevor was probably the most recent one that's close.
Trevor's the most recent one. And then you can go back to Cam Newton was very highly regarded coming out of high school and players like that. But it doesn't really make sense to me. I would imagine that he's just going to seize that job, but Ewers also stayed. He's thinking when is the I'm unfamiliar with this. When is the transfer portal shut?
I'm unfamiliar with that too. And that's, I guess, if that's still open, maybe that's what happens. Ewers transfers in a little bit and we hear about that. And that's just a thing you're allowed to do. I thought it might be closed by now, but maybe it's not. I just find the whole thing weird because they also won games with Ewers last year. They made the college football playoff. So it's also it's possible Ewers just holds down the job. But anyway,
a lot of people in the chat are making a really good point about just them in the NIL and how much influence that may have. And honestly, I don't have a lot of insight into the NIL and what kind of insight that has with these guys staying at specific school. I would imagine does Texas offer more money than they probably have a huge backing
budget. Yeah. I don't even know if there's a budget for NIL, if it's just unlimited, you just can spend whatever your donors allow for. I don't know how it works. It seems crazy to me. The Wisconsin had a great basketball player breakout this year. Real quick aside, AJ Storr, and then he transferred this year and took NIL money. And I know he turned down $750,000 from Kansas or something. He's we want $1 million. It's all right, that's kind of crazy. But back to the question by Peter. I've heard this a lot, Peter. Not to be harsh here, and I'm not trying to be blunt or harsh, but I almost feel like I have to be. I find this to be a horrific plan, and I'll tell you why. Say you wanted this to happen. You build up the roster, and you keep waiting on quarterback until Arch comes. How are you going to get Arch? Because Arch is a guaranteed probably number 1 overall pick in the draft, right? So now you either have to tank a season, which is not happening in the NFL, and we know a coach will never do that. especially not a coach for the Giants, not a John Mara led team. Or you have to be bad enough to get the number 1 overall pick, but now you're building up the roster. So you're not going to be bad enough to get that number 1 overall pick. So now how do you get him? Because no team who has number 1 overall is going to trade him or trade that pick to you. We literally just saw the Chicago Bears trade their quarterback, who some people believe they should continue on with. Half the fan base, it felt like, for Caleb Williams. They weren't going to miss Caleb Williams. No one's going to miss Arch Manning. No one's giving you that pick. It doesn't matter what you offer to get that pick. So the plan just doesn't work out in the NFL at all, because you need to luck your way into the number 1 pick, and then it's almost impossible to get it.
Yeah, that's a good point, Dan. And also it's just the general manager and the owner, they're not like, hey, in a couple of years, this guy who is related to Eli Manning is going to be around. So we got to suck. And all the moves they've made suggested that they're going to try to compete this year.
Right.
They're going to try. Now, could it be Drew Lock? Is it Daniel Jones? Going to be a quarterback? I have no idea.
That's the interesting thing. I'm still curious about that. I was looking back, dude. I had a higher grade on Drew Lock than Jones coming out.
You did? Oh, yes. Interesting. I loved his arm, man. The ball shot out of his arm at Mizzou, man. Yeah. It was fun to watch.
I didn't really have a high grade on either. I had mid-second on both, but I had a slightly higher grade on Lock.
Sean Smith says, love the show, guys. I like the interior defensive tackle and offensive line take by Nick. Keep building the trenches until both units are good. Keep it simple, not sold on the quarterbacks. Thank you so much, Sean, for the donation and the kind words. And it does just make sense. It goes back to old Vince Lombardi type of football. Just be tough. It's like one of the foundational mottos of football. Be tough in the trenches, be able to run the football, be able to pass protect, be able to pressure the passer and stop the run. And since Joe Schoen has come in here, he's made a lot of moves to do that. It's just, it hasn't really worked out. That's the unfortunate thing. The biggest problem with the Giants defense in 2022 was they could not stop the run. So Joe Schoen poured assets into the defensive line and he signed a linebacker. It still kind of sucked last year. I think there were other variables that worked into that. We've discussed that over the last year or so, but I think you got to just figure out that second interior defensive line position. And there are some interior defensive linemen that really fit what the Giants are looking to do. So I think that could be the, let's do this, Dan. And we've, I think, touched on this throughout the last 4 months or so. 2nd round pick. What is a surprising pick that makes sense to you that no one is really talking about? Kind of like the interior defensive line, but is there another position group that you think would be like, oh shit, it kind of makes sense, like a tight end or something like that?
Oh, not including interior defensive line?
No, let's remove that one because we've discussed that, but we always kind of associate that pick 47 with a cornerback or wide receiver if they go quarterback
or a
safety. But is there another position group where you're like, oh wow, I didn't think about that, but it kind of makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I would say tight end, but I don't really foresee them doing that. I don't know.
Neither
if there's
do I.
A tight end in that range. I think D tackle is the one though. Interior defensive line. There could be Braden Fisk there. There could be Chris Jenkins, who I like a lot and think would fit this defense really well. And I'd love to have him on this team.
They would love Chris Jenkins too, man.
Yes, they would.
The Giants, smart, tough, dependable, just workout warrior at Michigan.
Dexter Lawrence on your interior is just run dominant. That's just such a fun front. And I think he is more, I believe in his ability as a pass rusher at the next level. It's full projection, but I love the bloodline picks. You know how I feel. Sante Samuel, I was high on his son, and he ended up being a steal. These bloodline picks seem to work out a lot more than they don't, it feels like to me. But yeah, go ahead.
What about Brendan Rice?
I didn't get a chance to watch Rice this cycle. It's disappointing. I obviously can't watch everybody. And I know you brought him up in your sleepers, or at some point you brought him up.
No, I drafted him in the mock draft. Dueling mock drafts.
Yes.
And I like Brendan Rice. Yeah. He wasn't uber productive, but he's a contested catch guy. And if you're looking for that big X type, you don't get Rome Odunze. He's somebody you could probably get on I would say late day 2, who can come in and has those bloodlines, but he actually has a release package. He just didn't run a lot of routes, but I think he at least has the route running traits. And obviously he's been taught up and he's technically sound enough. And the fact that he does have a pretty expansive release package at least suggests to me that he's nuanced as a route runner, that he could run a more diverse route tree. He just wasn't necessarily asked to do so in Lincoln Riley's offense.
Right. And as far as getting back to Sean's question, or Sean's statement / question, I'm with that too, Sean. I believe in the trenches as well. And I just look at the example of Jim Harbaugh. Came to the 49ers, built through the trenches, turned them into a championship team that almost won the Super Bowl. Then he went to Michigan, a team that never had success against Ohio State, was always playing second fiddle, turned them into a champion team by winning through the trenches. The trenches are where everything starts and a lot of time ends in the NFL. You talk about safeties, corners. I love them. I used to love the idea of like pass coverage over pass rush. I've kind of flipped on that because there's just a lot of plays where those dudes are just not involved in the play, but every play, the trenches are involved on both sides of the ball.
It's one reason too, man. Just off your last statement, defensive line over corners. I think about the corners that fit what the Giants are going to do. And we know that the football is out like that, right? Football comes out really quick. That's why I've been talking so much about Max Melton. I think Andrew Phillips from Kentucky also fits this. Giants had both of those guys in for visits. Andrew Phillips was a top 30 visit, where their click and close and their ability to plant and drive and just fire downhill is so explosive. Because when you were playing off leverage, outside leverage, right? You're off and it's just a slant. It's quick game and quarterback catches it and he turns and you're just out of your stance immediately, and you can just drive through the catch point. That's how you create turnovers. And we can go back to 2020. 2022 was such a crazy year, right? Because the Giants, they didn't create any explosive plays and won a playoff game. So successful year for the New York Giants. No explosive plays on offense, 6 interceptions. On a Wink Martindale team, they had 6 interceptions.
All over, on defense.
They ranked last with the Raiders in interceptions specifically. They kind of benefited from some luck with the forced fumbles, and they were really timely fumbles too. Like the fumble Xavier McKinney forced on Travis Etienne as he was going in the end. There was a lot of plays on special teams, like Carolina Panthers in week 2. There was a fumble, I believe. But if you need cornerbacks who can do that, and I think Max Melton is that guy. So if the Giants do trade down, or if the Giants are sitting at 47, or if he fell to 70, I think with the athletic traits and the athletic testing that he's had, he's probably not going to fall all the way to 70. But those are the players that I think you can bring in here, and they would fit well with what the Giants are going to try to do with Shane Bowen.
I like it. I would love to get Melton. Again, even if it costs, we've seen Joe Shane go above projection to draft players, Josh Azudu, Wan'Dale Robinson, Cordell Flott. So I don't think it's impossible that even he might go if he loves him, goes at 47. And we'll see how that plays out. But I wouldn't be shocked. That you're asking, like, what would be a surprise? Taking a 5'9", 180-pound guy at 47 might be a surprise, but we've done it already with Wan'Dale Robinson, so it might happen again.
All right, I got a fun question for you from Nick Filato, right?
Okay.
Over under trades the New York Giants execute
on draft day. Okay.
What are you saying to that?
They had one last year, just the first round?
I believe so.
Okay. They had the year before. Did they have any? The first year they had
they had 2. They traded down twice.
Was that the Wan'Dale year?
Yeah.
I thought it was 2 years ago. Okay.
Yeah, 2022.
This is Joe Shane's 3rd draft. Oh my God. For a second, I thought this was his 4th draft. Okay. So the first year they had the Wan'Dale double trade back, right? Then that was it, right? I believe that was it for that year. I'm pretty sure.
I think so, yes.
I don't know if there might have been some late round swaps and stuff that we're just not remembering on day 3, but I don't think so. And then last year was just a trade up. So he's done trades in every draft. I think so much depends. Well, first of all, the first round, they might be trading up.
I know.
So what was the over under?
I didn't set it yet. I was asking you to set it. I was going to set it at 1.5.
Okay. Oh, you're setting 1.5. Over on 1.5. I think they're going to
over 2 trades. Okay.
I think they're trading up for the quarterback, and then I think they're going to trade back from whatever pick they have left to pick up more picks.
Okay. No, I would support that. And that would be that's something. If the Giants do trade up to get Drake May or whoever, JJ McCarthy, I think they're certainly going to trade back to recoup more assets. I think that's Joe Shane, I think, understands the value of getting a lot of guys in your building that you want, that you trust, that you like, that are smart, tough, and dependable, and that are on rookie contracts for at least 4 years.
Yeah. And it could be just the case like we saw 2 years ago with Wan'Dale, where he's like, I really want Wan'Dale, but I know I can trade back a couple times and still get him. And he might just have a guy like that and wherever the pick left. And this is what happened in both of our dueling mocks, our 7-round mocks. Like, we both traded up for the quarterback, May. We both wanted May. And then we traded back the next picks. I know I went a little too crazy. I saw the comments, traded a lot of next year's class away. But I recouped some of that class A. And B, I kept my 1st-round pick for next year. Okay. So my plan was always going to be, I'm going to trade that 1st-round pick next year back twice, and I'm going to pick up all those picks back, and I'm just not going to have a first next year, but I'll end up having those picks back. So just understand where the crazy madman mind was going with that one.
It's a long game. It's a long game, ladies and gentlemen.
Long game. Exactly.
Jay Ferris, thank you so much, Jay Ferris, longtime listener. He asks, who was your favorite mainstream NFL media analyst? And if you guys weren't doing NFL analyst jobs, what would you be doing? Jeez, that is a loaded and good question, Jay Ferris. So let's tackle this one, Dan.
Okay, who is my favorite mainstream analyst? Start with that one, and then I'll answer that. And then the second question will be harder to answer, so I need some time to think about that. My favorite mainstream analyst is Greg Cosell considered mainstream or no?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think so. I don't think he's.
Oh, dude, he's like the godfather of scouting and stuff.
I know, but like that's not. We think it's mainstream, Nick, because we love the X's and O's of this game.
Maybe,
and the people who listen to our podcast do too. But it's not the majority. Remember what Jordan Ron said the other day? Like nobody wants to hear about this stuff for the most part, and I think he's probably right. The majority of fans don't know or care about this stuff yet, so I'm going to take him out. I don't think that's fair.
Or is that just because it hasn't been put in front of them?
I think that's yes. I think that's the real reason for it. But you know who I'll go with? Yeah, I'm going to go with this one. I'm going to go with Mina Kimes. I've always liked Mina Kimes. I think she's great in her analysis. I like her delivery. I'm going to go with Mina Kimes.
All right. So Mina's excellent. I'm trying to think of, I might just default and go with someone generic. I don't have a favorite.
Yeah.
I was thinking Jeremiah, but it might just be Brugler because I appreciate the work that Brugler does. I think when you dive, like the X's and O's is one thing, and the scouting and the evaluation, but it's also kind of being like an investigative journalist diving into the background of each of these players. And I think that's a totally different skill set. It takes a lot of patience, it takes a lot of communication skills, it takes a lot of networking. And I always had respect for Dane Brugler's work for that. So I might go with Dane Brugler on this, but I mean, you ask me next week, I might have somebody else. I don't necessarily have like one that I'm like, this is really definitely like this guy that I want to go to.
I don't either. I'll make you answer the other question first. What would you be doing if you weren't working in sports?
If I wasn't working in sports, so I work in sports in several different ways too. So if I wasn't working in sports, I was an exercise science major before this. I got a degree in exercise science. So I might have went the route of physical therapy and things like that. I've always been into comedy and stuff of that nature as well. So I'm going to probably just say something along the something regarding biology, probably.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. That's what I did when I first got out of the Marine Corps. So I did that for a little while and it always interested me.
I like it. For me, I started my career in marketing and advertising for Videology, a company that does video advertising on websites. Absolutely hated my job. In the middle of that job that I hated, I was on Twitter one day in the early days of Twitter in like 2012 when it was nothing. There was like at that time probably hundreds to 1,000 users on that. And Chris Wessling, rest in peace, who used to run RotoWorld, tweeted one day, "I can't believe how poorly managed our Twitter account is for such a company like RotoWorld." And at that point, RotoWorld was everything to fantasy football, like people who played fantasy sports. So I found his email and I emailed him and I said, "I'll do this for free. Just let me get a chance to run this account." Started running that account, made connections to Mike Clay, who used to work for Pro Football Focus. Now he works for ESPN. Leveraged that into a job with Pro Football Focus, writing for them, then Fox Sports and CBS Sports. So it was that got me into this. But I don't really know what I would be doing if I wasn't doing this. This is just so tailor-made for who I am. And I'm not really like a school guy. Like, I don't think my parents would want me to become a lawyer. I don't think I have that in me. I think what would happen to me, Nick, would be I would work as a school teacher. And that's not like, I have utmost respect for teachers. And I have multiple friends who are teachers. And I know, it's a very serious job as well. But big reason for me for doing that, Nick, would be work-life balance. And that to me is very important. I would want to have the summers off and, just the ability to have other things in my life outside of work if I wasn't doing what I was passionate about. And this is what I'm passionate about. Now, it's not to say it's the only thing I can be passionate about. This is what I'm most passionate about. There are other things I can be passionate about. I mean, love to be an entrepreneur. That would be the other thing I would consider. Go back to school, go to business school, try to learn how to run my own business, then try to come up with my own idea to run my own business. Like that's something I've also considered as a next step or at some point a step in my life. But like outside of that, like lawyer, going back into marketing, all those types of jobs, 9 to 5, that type of stuff, it's just not for me anymore. I don't think it ever was for me. So I don't know if I would ever be willing to do a job that doesn't give me work-life balance unless it was running my own company.
Dan needs to play golf, ladies and gentlemen.
I need to play my golf. Okay.
Golf and hiking. Dan's a big hiker too. And Dan and I have done a couple hikes when he went out and visited me out in Arizona. And that was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for the question, Jay Ferris. Gil Martinez is back. Gil, what's going on, bro? He asked, and thank you for the donation. New York Giants have won 6 NFC East titles since 1990.
Oof, terrible.
I know. I don't know how.
years. Jesus.
I know, man. I don't know how to feel about that. I want to be a competitive team. Great quarterback play will get them there. If the front office and Brian Dable believe they can get that guy and if that guy is in this draft, they have to do it. Yeah, Gil, I mean, I agree with you, especially where they're picking. You're not said it so many times. I don't want to be redundant, but you're not picking this high all the time. Now, the New York Giants have, but that's why they've had like 10,000 coaches over the last decade, right? Like they don't want to do that. Like they're picking this high again. Brian Dable is going to be out of a job. That's just the way this works, especially in this market, unfortunately.
Yeah. Unless they draft the quarterback this year, because then they get that extra timeline.
Yes.
Which is why I would believe they're very motivated to get that quarterback. But yes, if they don't get the quarterback, Gil, and they have another really bad season, there is a chance that we end up losing Dable and Shane. Then we're back to then we might have like the next Shermer or Judge. Like he's just deadbeat type of guys that don't offer any upside whatsoever. Shermer was a retread. Judge was just over his head. Never should have got a head coach job. Dable actually feels like there's something there, even if it's just as simple as he's the guy who can mold a quarterback with big time traits that are projectable. That's still worth more to me than anything Shermer or Judge ever offered as a head coach. So it's like, I don't want to go back to that cycle. Joe Shane, that's another one because people can say that you can find smart GMs or you can, get the next up and coming GM and there's more options there. I feel like the head coach, I don't feel like there's that many options. Like even this cycle, dude, like look what happened to the Commanders. They ended up hiring Dan Quinn. No knock on Dan Quinn. He's a great defensive mind. He really helped that Cowboys defense. If the Giants hired Dan Quinn next year, a Dan Quinn type dude after firing Dable, like I'm just not feeling that at all. I feel no upside behind that. And what are we going to do at quarterback? Like I'm going to bring in Cliff Kingsbury, who sucked with Kyler Murray and sucked with Patrick Mahomes. And now all of a sudden he's supposed to be a good coach. I have no idea why the Commanders even hired him. But so it just feels like lost at times. So I'm with you. I want them to go get this quarterback and try to be a team that can have the best quarterback in the division for 10, 15 years.
Dan, I want to ask you a question since we're talking about quarterbacks. Say the Giants forgo going quarterback. They do go with wide receiver at 6. They don't trade back, and they had to select a quarterback somewhere in this draft. Where would you want them to select that quarterback?
It's a great question. Actually, Adrian asked me this one as well, and I've gone back and forth on this because the start of you guys are thinking a lot alike, you two. But the start of both of you are Italian, I think. The start of
I'd imagine, with her last name, she's got to be Italian.
Yeah, she's got to be Italian. The start of the offseason, I was like, you know what? I watched how DeVito played with Dable. It was really impressive to me, and it was considering what he was at. I was impressed with what he got out of Jones in 2022. I was impressed with what he got out of Tyrod. Get me a quarterback any round because I think Dable can maximize him. And then I thought about that more, and I'm like, where does that get me? If Dable maximizes DeVito's talent, I'm never winning divisions consistently with that. There's just a cap there. And I feel that way very similarly to the rest of these quarterbacks. Like Joe Milton's maybe the one you could convince me of if you could really turn him into something. I don't know if I even feel that's possible, though, Nick. And Rattler, maybe if I had to, one of those two. But, I'm not in on, I think someone's going to take Penix anyway in round 1, but I'm not really even in on him at 47, to be completely honest. I don't understand the ceiling play for Michael Penix. I guess if he just becomes the ultimate best processor in the world, he can hit his ceiling. But the only pocket guys right now who win are Joe Burrow, and he doesn't have what Burrow has. He doesn't have the ball placement, the anticipation. He doesn't have the pocket. One underrated thing about Burrow is how he manipulates pockets. Penix is actually pretty good at it, but he's not on Joe Burrow's level. That's the most elite level of maneuvering in the pocket. So where's my ceiling there? I don't personally see it. So I kind of need a ceiling if I'm taking a risk at quarterback. I guess there might be a ceiling with Rattler. I guess there might be one with Milton. I don't know if I really see it, to be honest. History tells us once you get out of round 1, it's mostly bust with the occasional outlier. Do you have any different answer to that?
I am open to taking a developmental day 3 pick because a lot of those guys don't end up working out anyways. And if you think Brian Dable can actually access this guy's traits, he was really good on the whiteboard, he retained information well. Joe Milton is always the name that comes to me because he's 6'5", 230 pounds, and he has an absolute cannon attached to his torso. He's a howitzer. So I wouldn't mind taking a kick at that can on day 3, personally, if the Giants want to bring in a developmental guy. I don't even know if they want to, if it's not going to be their guy, though, because the guy might get placed on the practice squad, or you're basically saying Tommy DeVito bye-bye, which I'm okay with, right? Tommy DeVito was a fun story, but Tommy DeVito is not going to be your long-term guy, more than likely. So it's does it end up being I don't want to say a wasted pick, but there are other places on the roster that require some depth. And I think there are going to be guys who might be available later on. But if you're asking me, I'm going to say Milton on day 3.
And that also brings up another interesting question too, Nick, because it's like, if you make that pick, are you viewing him as a developmental quarterback to be your QB1, or are you going along lines of what Joe Schoen said, which is like, Joe Schoen essentially said it his last presser. If we take a quarterback that's outside of round 1, the goal is to get a QB2. That's your backup quarterback. And then he talked about how that allows to save some money against the cap. We had to pay $10 million cap space to Tyrod and $5 million in cap space or whatever it is to Lock.
Well, I think you just bring him in, and it's not like, hey, this is our quarterback too. It's, hey, let's see what this kid has, and you develop him, and you see if he takes strides forward in his game. And I mean, the Giants, they have this, this unfortunate reality where their quarterbacks tend to get injured. And it's, if Joe Milton could get into the game, could he show you anything? Now, there's a lot of stuff to iron out there, but I like just baseline traits. I can't speak on anything else other than that because I haven't talked to the young man, but he has. If he had all of the other aspects of playing quarterback that we can't discern just through watching tape, he has the baseline that at least suggests there's an elite ceiling there if he can access that because the arm. Now, I think the arm talent maybe isn't as developed as we want, right? But he has the cannon. Now, can you force him to throw with a little bit more anticipation? Can you force him to put more pace and touch on the football? Those are all questions I can't answer right now, but at least he's 6'5", 230 pounds and has that cannon.
And
he played an unconventional offense too.
True. And that's sometimes a good thing. I remember hearing this discussion with Hendon Hooker where they're like, I heard a scout say, actually, we like this, that he played in that system because now we can mold him from scratch and he doesn't have these preconceptions. But my question, or not my question, one thing I would add to that would be, crap, I lost my train of thought there, but it was, I'm trying to access it again. I don't know if I'm going to get back there. Sorry.
It's okay.
One of them was the discussion of like, how do you find a Brock Purdy? But I had something else that I wanted to get to. That's kind of a separate thing about quarterback, but I don't think I'm going to get back there. So let's move past it.
RL 1991 says, and thank you for the donation. Based on all accounts, it's Jaden Daniels at 2. Why would the Patriots be still drumming up interest if they had conviction on May at 3? Maybe they want JJ, but I think they can get him and still attain assets as well. I love this take.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great take. And I think ultimately, if I had to guess one thing that might happen on draft day, it's this. It's a 3-way trade with the Giants, the Cardinals, and the Patriots. The Patriots move back to 4. The Cardinals move back to 6. And the Giants move up to 3. The Giants end up giving them a ton of assets. The Patriots give a little back to the Cardinals. And the Patriots still get J.J. McCarthy at 4. The Giants get May at 3. The Cardinals get whoever the Chargers don't take at receiver. Or if they win the lottery, the Cardinals, the Chargers take Joe Alt at 5. And they still get Marvin Harrison at 6, despite picking up assets moving back from 4 to 6. And this is like the game theory side of it. I think this could happen. And Joe Schoen's already, I mean, Brandon Beane, when he was in Buffalo, didn't give a crap what he gave up. And he said since, like, it doesn't matter all the assets we gave up now. We have Josh Allen. He's right. But it's a little bit of game theory because, like, if the Patriots don't want May, love May, they don't really need to do this 3-team trade. Like, they kind of do because you have to worry about the Vikings, I guess, trading up. But, like, do they? Are the Patriots really willing to move back to 11? Are the Cardinals really willing to move back to 11? I don't think so, honestly. And so that's the game theory side of it if you're Joe Schoen, and that's going to make it tough. Like, when you get into these trade conversations, it's just like trading fantasy football. If you guys have played in fantasy football leagues, game theory plays a role. And some people will shop your trade offers. Some people will take it right up as it is and respect the deal. I don't know how, I wonder how you feel about that, Nick, but it's okay to shop, but it's something that I think could happen. Honestly, I think it's a good point by you, RL 1991. And thank you for the donation. I think that would be the most likely scenario for the Giants trading up. They move all the way to 3, give a ton of assets up. Patriots go back to 4 to guarantee McCarthy. And then the Cardinals move to 6.
Look, the Giants are in a position right now where the other teams that need a quarterback are picking outside the top 10. And there are like a cluster of 6, 7 guys that are like the blue chip dudes. And I think the Giants might be able to seize on that to get their quarterback and just have the Patriots or Cardinals trade back a little bit, still get their guy or at least a blue chip player, and everybody walks away happy.
Well, I'll say this. I'll walk away happy and you'll walk away happy, Nick. But if the Giants ultimately end up trading up to 3 and giving their next year first round pick, we'll be happy just because we are willing to take that risk. But it's not like the Joe Shane knocked it out of the park, if we're going to be honest. Because again, the Jets moved from 6 to 3, and all they gave up was 3 second-round picks. And a first-round pick is worth so much more than a second-round pick, and that wouldn't be it. They give up the Giants, and probably another day 2 pick either this year or next year. Next year's one and a day 2 pick this year or next year. So it's
my point more so is just the Vikings and the Raiders and the Broncos don't even have access to this trade because all three of those teams want to stay in the top 6. Now the Giants, it depends on the capital the Giants give up. Like I'm right there with you, and I'm always going to be in the camp where I don't want the Giants to give up future first round assets, but I at least acknowledge that has to happen sometimes. I don't want it.
So not fun to cover next year if we don't have a first round pick.
Exactly.
But it won't matter if Drake May breaks out and looks awesome in year 1. I really won't care.
Exactly. I'm right there with you. Renee Ruiz asked, thank you so much for the donation. Shane said they lost 170 draftable players who returned to the NCAA. That was a really interesting quote, by the way. Might this make him more inclined to make lots of draft day trades?
It's a great point by you, Renee Ruiz, because I think that a lot more GMs than we think, maybe Joe Shane included, have fewer players on their draftable board than we think, and for how many picks there are in the draft. At which point they're just like, we don't need these picks. We could just get UDFAs, and it's not going to be that much of a difference. So I think you're right. It might make him more inclined to trade assets. What this could come down to for me is if there's a discussion to move up for one of these quarterbacks with the Giants and they're getting close, they might be more willing to give up picks this year than next because of this.
That's what I was onto as well. If they're not, if they're not as high on a lot of these, on a lot of these players, just trade 4th round pick to get next year's 4th or maybe even a next year's 3rd if another team is desperate and wants a certain player. Absolutely. And then now next year you'll have more ammunition depending on what you do in the top 6 anyways, right? To trade up and maneuver. And Joe Shane has definitely showed a penchant to want to move and be mobile during the draft, and
which is great.
Very active on the phone. Oh, absolutely. That's one thing that it's one of the many things we did not appreciate about Dave Gettleman until his final draft, where he decided to make a bunch of trades to make Daniel Jeremiah look like a fool.
Well, he was always looking to trade Gettleman. He famously would always tell you after the draft, we almost traded up for Will Hernandez. We traded up for DeAndre Baker. We almost traded up for, who was the other guy? Not Lorenzo Carter, Azeez Ojulari. Like, he tried to trade up all the time, but he finally did one trade back and then couldn't even make it.
Two or three trade backs.
Oh, yeah.
Because he also traded back twice later in the draft, or maybe it was once in the third round. Yeah. What was the third round?
Oh, third round. Okay. I don't remember.
Yeah. For the Aaron Robinson.
Oh, yeah.
He might have traded up to get Aaron Robinson, but he traded back multiple times. It might have been 2 or 3 times because Daniel Jeremiah afterwards was like, of course he does this after I made my statement. Like, Dave Gettleman would never trade back ever. And he did it the first round. And
that
then
was
he did
kind of the first time he did.
Yeah. As a Giants general manager.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't think he did it much as a GM of the Panthers, but what a disaster he is as a general manager. So
you almost said something else there. Yeah. Peter, this is our last one, by the way. Peter Rodonzo asks, thank you for your donation, Peter. If Neal fails and Illuminor is our right tackle, who would be our right guard?
That's like part of what we were getting to a little earlier, what Adriana asked me, which is, would you be better off trying to convert Neal to guard now so he can do that? I don't think they'll do that. So if Neal fails, Illuminor moves to right tackle, Nick, and then it could be what you said. Stinnie comes in and plays right guard, right? Like, that could be the position, or Josh Ezeudu, right?
It could be John Runyon. I mean, he played right guard last year. He played over 1,000 snaps at right guard. So I think you're going to feel it out at that point. You have options. Could be Stinnie, could be Runyon, could be Ezeudu.
Could be a second-round pick this year.
Could be a second-round pick this year. It could be Cooper Beebe. It could be Christian Haynes.
Right.
Could be a lot of different players. Let's do this before we get out of here, too. And if anybody has any more questions, please hit the super chat and ask Dan and I. What is your ideal offensive line right now?
Oh, with what they have now, assuming they get none in the draft?
Assuming they get none in the draft.
Highest ceiling offensive line, assuming they get none in the draft, would be Andrew Thomas, left tackle, John Runyon, left guard, John Michael Smith, center, Illuminor, right guard, Evan Neal, right tackle. That, to me, is highest ceiling.
Yes. I see.
Or would you
ceiling? No, I feel like ceiling Ezeudu has to, if he's healthy enough, Ezeudu has to be involved. If we're talking about ceiling, that's just saying that he's reaching what he's potentially capable.
I think that's fair to say that he has a higher ceiling like Illuminor at guard.
Yeah, so I would put probably Ezeudu in at right guard, Because, dude, man, his movements, like the movement skills, the balance and the control on the move, and then the vice grip hands. We talked
I
about the
would be
vice.
so scared though having Neil at right tackle and Ozudu at right guard and pass protection.
That's why we're saying ceiling. They have
Ceiling,
to, they have to certainly
We're only
prove
talking about ceiling, yeah. Is that floor at pass protection of those two on the right side is nightmarish almost.
I think they have to play Runyon or Luminor at right guard if they want to trot Neil out there at right tackle, because the Glowinski thing did not work out. I don't know if there was, I don't want to say bad blood with Glowinski in the order, but it did seem a little unstable there towards the end.
He ended up him, right? No one signed him, right?
I don't believe so. Actually,
he may retire. Like, I don't know.
I want to look that up. You know what, man? He wasn't terrible when he was with the Colts when the Giants signed him. The pass protection was just a nightmare, though. Right now, he is still a free agent, but he could be one of those players who gets signed after the draft. There's going to be a bunch of players who were signed after the draft when certain teams don't select the guys that they wanted to select at certain areas of the draft.
Yeah, hopefully he's not one of the like two guys that sign in training camp and then retire because of Joe Judge runs such a high school-esh
Joe Looney. Yeah, I remember Joe Looney.
Like two guys retire on Joe Judge. Like, I'm not doing this. Is this guy crazy? He's making me run laps.
Who was the other guy? It was Joe Looney, and who was the second?
The center, right? I think it was the center.
There was another guy, and people in the chat will probably yell it at us.
Yeah, I hope they do. But yeah.
Yeah, Dan. So that is all of our super chats. If anybody else has anything else, you can submit it into the super chat area. And if not, Dan, what are our final thoughts?
Okay.
Before we just got another super chat. So I want, it's from Peter again. He asks a follow-up on Neil. What was his tape like coming out of college, and where was that guy?
Good question. Like we've talked about, Peter, like the tape was good. It's not like we're not here to say it was perfect. We weren't watching like Joe Thomas from Wisconsin on tape. He wasn't that ever. And there were flaws in his game that we discussed in his profile that have popped up at the NFL level. And that's what you're always going to find flaws. No prospect is perfect. I love when Daniel Jeremiah says that, because it's the best thing you can hear, because it's so true. You just hope that those flaws are minimized, and they haven't been at the NFL level. And I really think, like, just because there's such a stark contrast, Nick, between what we saw at Alabama and what we've seen so far, it's not like it's been a situation where it's been like, oh, he's been worse than what he was at Bama, but it's not that much worse. It's been like just a totally different player on tape. And I think a lot of this is confidence. I really am strongly a believer in confidence and injuries. He just hasn't been healthy almost at all during his Giants career. He's either played through injury or missed time with injury and then came back and compensated for another injury his entire Giants career so far.
So here are from my scouting report coming out of college, here are my can improve section. Is a waist bender, leans way too far onto blocks. That's something that he still has a problem with in the NFL. Has issues with balance. Will put too much of his weight on defenders with his weight over his toes, leaving him vulnerable to counter moves. Issues with balance hinder his effectiveness when redistributing his weight. Finds himself on the ground too often, susceptible to push-pulls. Anchor is solid, but not as good as one would expect for a player of his size. Pad level is too high. It's an issue with him being so tall. Sustainment of blocks through the entirety of a play. Run hot and cold. Paid too much attention for too long to slanting 5 and 4 techniques. Who were diversions for loopers and creepers. Has past rumors about weight control. Those were all my can improves. I got to say, all of those have manifested in the NFL.
Yeah.
Every single one of those.
Yeah, it usually doesn't happen like this, but it can happen like this. But I also think like there's other, like, I feel like, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, but my memory of watching Evan Neal on tape was that I was more concerned with his run blocking than his pass blocking. I think even in those concerns you broke down, a lot of that was from the run game. But the issue is that the pass game has been a real big problem for him at the NFL level. And there are some things that weren't even in your concerns that I think have showed up, like the fact that like he's just beat up the arc sometimes right off the snap, and he just doesn't get into his stance fast enough, and it looks like he's just a tick too slow. I never felt like that was the case really at Alabama as much. And maybe that's just as simple as, look, in Alabama, yes, it's the SEC, but a lot of these guys are not even making practice squads at edge rusher who you're facing. And then the NFL, it's the best edge rushers every week. Could just be that, the speed of the game. We've seen that with some players. They don't adjust the speed of the NFL, and that's why projection is so hard at the NFL level. And that's why you can't just look at stats from college and try to project them. Be like, he's the best stats guy. He's going to be the best guy. Because we know that's just not how it works. But it is crazy that all of those concerns you had have manifested themselves, because that just simply doesn't happen a lot for prospects. They don't hit, it doesn't go down the list like that.
No, it doesn't. And it's not that like, oh, the evaluation was so good. It's just he hasn't developed. That's what that suggests to me, because it wasn't consistent on tape. Those are just little things that flashed on tape that I was like, I got to make a note of this because they're on tape. But it's not like it was happening every game or every play. But what was his vulnerabilities in college have really came to light in the NFL.
Yep.
And I'm just hoping that can be rectified at this point. This isn't just an athlete who isn't as athletic as we initially thought. Jay Ferries comes back from the top rope too. Oh, yeah, something else to say. Sorry,
I was just gonna say, like, it would be crazy if it doesn't manifest, if we don't see improvement and development, because then it's like, wow, the Giants found a way to get to the biggest offensive tackle bust ever in Eric Flowers and Evan Neal. And that's what they would go down as, like, just straight up. And I shouldn't say that. There's probably a lot of teams that we just don't cover, Nick, that have had top 5 picks be total epic bust. What was the kid from the Rams a few years ago who I loved as a prospect who just sucked?
No, that was over a decade ago. The kid from Auburn.
A while ago, the Auburn.
Yeah, Robinson, I think his name was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's not like this is that Robert Gallery. There have been a bunch of them, but and by the way, that year there were a lot of Giants fans who wanted them to take Robert Gallery instead of Eli Manning. A lot of, or it was instead of Eli Manning or Roethlisberger. And then the debate was, I remember that was my first year really following the draft. It was Robert Gallery, stay at 4 and take Gallery, was where a lot of the the Giants fan base was. Some wanted Sean Taylor, which would have been interesting. Others wanted them to sit at 4 and take Roth. And that's who Coughlin supposedly wanted. And then others wanted them to trade up for Eli. But obviously, Robert Gallery would have been the worst option possible.
It definitely seems that way. Jay Ferries comes back, and he says, favorite band and alcoholic drink.
Nice. Favorite band living today is My Morning Jacket. But some runners-up would be Khruangbin, who I'm going to see live again. And
we say that again?
Khruangbin.
What the hell is that?
It's a Thai word for airplane, I think.
Huh.
You might like them. You should try them out. They're really good.
Probably, dude, you know how I am with music. I'm a little weird, right? Like I don't like just like listen to new music and then get stuck to it. I'm kind of like a curmudgeon, like old, like, oh, these are the bands I like and this is what I listen to. But then if I hear a song on the radio and it sticks and I'm like, this is a good beat, then I'll start like incorporate it into my rotation.
All time for me, favorite band, Jay Ferries, would be probably Allman Brothers. And then favorite alcoholic drink for me is just straight up tequila, tequila soda, tequila straight. Tequila is the only alcohol that I enjoy, but I love beers. The problem is, so I love beer, but I just haven't been drinking it as much lately. I'll be honest, like alcohol used to be a decent part of my life. Now it's almost non-existent part of my life. I do it only socially at this point because alcohol really messed with my sleep schedule and it just screwed up my sleep period. And I'm not a good sleeper to begin with. And after like dealing with a lot of bad hangovers, stomach issues from alcohol and having it impact my sleep that much, I decided that it probably wasn't good for me. And I'll still do it socially always. And, so that leads to some, occasional, probably 2, 3, 4, 5 times a month type thing. But it used to be something I would have some beers, Nick. Like it used to be like I would go into a draft weekend and I definitely crush like 15, 20 beers a draft weekend. Now I'll probably have 0 this draft weekend.
Yeah, I'm probably not going to drink much this draft weekend. Maybe I'll have one at the on the live show.
You always have a whiskey. I feel like you always treat yourself to a whiskey.
Yeah. So favorite band, I'm going to go with the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and then alcoholic drink, but it could be Queen. It could be A7X, Avenged Sevenfold. I like a lot of solo artists as well, but alcoholic drink, it's a whiskey base with whatever. I guess I'll say old fashioned, but I don't even think it is old fashioned. It's just every damn restaurant I go to, the old fashioned is like the only whiskey drink they have on there. And then they have a bunch of vodka options, and I can drink vodka, but I'm more of a whiskey guy, man. So I'm going to go with just a whiskey based drink and then just throw whatever else in there. And I'm more than likely going to enjoy it.
Yeah. It's whiskey for you, tequila for me. We got anything else?
No, that would, and then I'm just going to click this one because he asked it twice. And Jay Ferries, thank you so much for the donation. Moscow Mule with gin, Costa says, and that's a good, that's another good drink as well. Yeah. Moscow Mule.
I can drink gin if it's in a mixed drink, but gin straight up to me is arguably the grossest alcohol in the history of the world. I don't understand gin straight up. To me, it tastes like I'm drinking like grass. It really tastes like grass to me. Like
I have an unpopular take. Wine sucks. I don't understand wine at all.
I don't understand wine either. I don't think it tastes good. And I think it leads to some of the worst hangovers. There's so much sugar in it.
I've said it so many times and people are like, yeah, what are you saying? And it's just, I think people lie to themselves that wine tastes good.
No, people do like wine.
No, I know. Obviously I'm being like an asshole, but like it does like, oh man, oh, it's so good. It's so, they like, they look
like sommelier type stuff. Oh yeah.
They look elegant. They're sipping it and they're like, oh.
No, we shouldn't do this though. There are probably some people who are into wine on this. And I don't want to yuck anyone else's yums. Like if you enjoy
I'm not yucking anybody else's yums. But please yuck all of my yums. I don't care. We can can have
Me too.
commentary on other things. Like it's fine. But for me, like I taste it and it just like lingers in my mouth, and then there's an aftertaste, and then it just like sits there. And people say the same stuff about
Notes of
whiskey, but
oak.
yeah, I like that like sting of whiskey, right?
Okay.
Wine isn't a sting. Wine
No.
doesn't sting at all. Wine lingers. Wine's like a fart that lingers in your mouth, whereas whiskey is like a nice little just jab. And sometimes you need to get
Yeah.
jabbed.
Yeah, I hear you. That's a fun note to end it on, right?
I think so.
Final thoughts, I guess, for the draft. My final thoughts is I think the Giants are going to make this move. I think they're going to go up and get the quarterback. I would be less convinced of this if I was more convinced the Patriots are convinced on Drake May.
Yeah.
Because my opinion is that the JJ stuff was smoke and the Giants really want Drake May. And so if that's the case and they have an opportunity to get him, they will go get him. So that's my final prediction and thoughts. But I still feel like it's less than 50%, even though I think it's going to happen. I feel like a lot of this has to do with me convincing myself and wishfully thinking this into it, trying to wishfully think this into existence. Discussed with my brother and dad today in our group chat. And my brother's like, stop. He always likes to, he's smart with this. He's like, don't ever get your hopes up with the Giants. What you want to happen is rarely going to happen. Do you remember the last 10 years of our life? And he's right. So,
I mean, he sounds like another depressed New York Giants fan.
Yeah,
which we all are. I don't think I have a percentage over 50 either. I think I'm on the same wavelength as you. I think the Giants are going to try to trade up. I think they really like Drake May, and they've kind of done a lot to not have that out there. Like when we heard that Drake May was with Eli Manning, you heard about that for like a day, and then everyone shut the fuck up about it.
Yeah,
to the point where we were like, wait, is that real? Did they actually like work together? And they did.
We didn't
right?
see a video of Eli and Drake hit social media where it's like Drake going over plays with Eli and all that. You're right.
And like that with the 6 games, I think it was that he was at, with the connections with Mac Brown. There's just a lot there to suggest. And you know that Brian Daboll wants this. I think he wants this type of quarterback. If it did check out, you also had the report that came out that the Giants were much more interested. Was it? I don't know if that was actually an official report or it was just somebody bullshitting on Twitter that they were more interested, or JJ McCarthy was better than Drake May, like all this kind of stuff.
Oh, there's a lot,
yeah. There's just a lot out there that suggests the Giants aren't that interested in Drake May, and I just think a lot of that could be smoke.
I loved what I saw today from Dan Orlovsky. I don't know if you caught that.
No, I didn't. I saw people commenting on it, but I didn't watch the video.
He did a breakdown of like 4 or 5 concepts that Drake May threw at North Carolina. And like, he's like, this is exactly what Brian Daboll likes to run. This is exactly what Brian Daboll likes to run. This is exactly what Brian Daboll likes to run. And look how well he throws this thing. And I'm like, yeah, kind of remember seeing all these concepts on tape. I don't know if they've always been thrown into the areas that Drake May was throwing them into, but they can be if the quarterback is willing to do it and has the conviction to do it and the arm talent and confidence to do it. And so he kind of does, like, he kind of fits exactly what Brian Daboll likes from a schematic standpoint, from a concept standpoint. So that's interesting to me as well.
Same, man. And that's what I hope happens too. I'm willing to part ways with some picks, which I'm usually not, to finally at least take a kick at the can of having a top 5 quarterback. So if it's not that, go with the receiver at 6 or trade back.
And the highest upside scenario to me is Joe Schoen plays poker here. Really, really plays poker. Doesn't give in to the Patriots and doesn't believe that they'll trade back with the Vikings. Lets the Patriots take McCarthy. Lets the Cardinals take Harrison, and then goes from 6 to 5 to take. In which you may not even have to do at that point too, because I don't even know if the Chargers are willing to move down to 11 with the Vikings. But I think of all the teams, Cardinals and Patriots, that you can call the bluffs on, Nick, I think the Chargers are the one you can't call the bluff on because there's so many tackles in this class that I think they'd be willing to go to 11.
I think that's a great point, and that's the one team I don't think you screw around with. I think you just give up pick 70 or whatever it is, because you're right. You can trade out of that. Maybe you don't get Joe Alt, but you will get Fuaga or somebody else.
You might even want Latham. Like, there's even a chance they take Latham at 5, honestly. He's just like a perfect fit for Harbaugh.
He is, man. So there's so much game theory. There's so many different scenarios that can manifest. No one said last year that the Texans would trade back up and select Will Anderson after going CJ Stroud. So it was Will Levis was the talk at that time.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Be careful following the betting markets, because hours before the draft last year, Levis was a massive favorite to go number 2 overall, and he fell all the way to round 2. So just keep that in mind when you're like, but DraftKings is saying -330, the Giants do this. And it's like, well, DraftKings also, or whoever it is, also said Will Levis was going number 2 overall last year. So.
All right, real quick, we have something from David H. He says, sad Giants fan here. Thanks for suffering along with us. Hey, David.
The life of a Giants fan now.
Must commiserate with each other. One more thing, Dan. I wanted to ask you, if the Washington Commanders went with JJ McCarthy, how surprised would you be? And what would that do to the Giants picking at 6? Would that kind of effectively eliminate 3? Because there's a lot of smoke and maybe
Yes.
bullshit out there about Jaden Daniels being the apple of the eye of the Patriots.
No, I think that's like it's a great question. I think it's like a perfect scenario for the Giants if they do in fact like May, which we don't know for sure. If they
Yes.
do in fact like May, love May, that's like perfect because you got McCarthy at 2, then you got Jaden Daniels. I think they'd snap him off Patriots. Now you're at 4. I don't personally think the Cardinals are that willing to give up on Harrison. They might be trying to trade with the Giants, thinking that the Chargers will go. But the Giants, I think, at that point can potentially call that bluff out because I just don't think the Cardinals are down to go to 11. I will not believe that they're willing to go get out of Neighbors and Harrison range. So if I'm Shane at that point, I am calling the Cardinals bluff. I really am. And I'm saying, nope, I don't want this. Then I'm trading 6 to 5 to get May. And that's how I would play it. He may not feel that confident in doing that, Nick. He may be like, I don't care. I can't take this risk. I need to get Drake May. I'm going to 4 now with the Cardinals. But that's how I would play because you're giving up so much less assets to go to 6 to 5 instead of 6 to 4.
It's a good point. I just wonder, like you said, man, I'd be a little bit scared with the Chargers because the Chargers may be in that mindset of like, dude, I'll trade back to 11, 12. They're going to give me their next year's first.
Right.
The Giants can give me a 3rd round pick. Like,
Right.
screw you, Giants. Like,
I guess
no,
that's a great
they
point
want the
because
guy,
that bypasses that the possibility, right?
Yeah, so I think I would just pick up the phone, call Monty Ossenfort, and give up whatever I have to get up to 4.
It
So
better
not
not
even-
be next year's first, though, at that point.
I don't think it would be.
Can't.
I don't think it would
Yeah.
be. And
Let's see
the Cardinals have been interested. Like last year, they traded back. They ended up getting Paris Johnson still because they traded back up. So they've
Right.
maneuvered a lot in the draft and have accrued a lot of assets in doing so.
That's a
But
good point.
I wouldn't want to rely on the Chargers' options if Drake
Good
May
point.
did fall that far because there are a lot of desperate teams.
Yeah, you
picking
changed my
11.
mind on this already, especially with the idea that he has already moved back up because that could be Cardinals move down to 11 and they move back up. So you're right. You've changed my mind on that entirely. So good point. Good point by you.
I think that's everything, buddy.
Yep. It's everything for now. Final thoughts of the draft. This will be the last time you hear from us until Thursday night, obviously. Enjoy your time. Take some time off Wednesday. Take a breath like we will. Take a breather and get yourself prepared for Thursday because it's going to be a wild ride coming up. And I think if we do hear a Giants trade, we're not going to hear it until Thursday night, which is the craziest part. So get ready. It's going to be a wild ride. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you soon.